Greetings, welcome to and/or welcome back to my YouTube page. Hi, hello, I'm Fire Lotus the Witch, and today we're going to talk about mundane before magical and why it is crucial to have that practice in your own practice. Um, so, what is mundane? Mundane is our normal day life. You know how weird shit happens and people are like, hey, that's a coincidence. Anyways, mundane would basically be, say you have a haunted house or you just moved into a house and you heard weird shit at night. Investigating the mundane would be going to the attic to see if there are raccoons or squirrels that are making nests up there. Or if it's the plumbing, if it's the piping, if it's just an old house that hasn't fully settled yet and it creaks. Or if there's a paranormal aspect to it. So, now, the reason I specifically like to practice the mundane before magical, because it goes into it falls into the category of the people that, and we all go through it at some point in time in our spiritual practice. It is completely normal. But when we go around thinking everything is divine sign, it's going to lead you to stumble and fall and spiral in ways that you don't really need to waste your time unless you just want to experience that, if you understand what I mean. So, in other words, like another example of mundane before magical. Say I'm burning some candles, right? And I'm burning two 7-day candles, the ones that are encased in glass, and then I'm burning two taper candles. And the taper candles are just completely like going all over the place, right? It's not burning right, the flames flickering and everything like that. But I also have an AC unit running in my room. It's going to affect the airflow. So in other words, if you have a central heating and say one of the vents, whether it's on the floor or above it, is directly right next to the altar, that is going to affect how those candles, or specifically the flame, is going to burn. So if you're trying to communicate with a goddess or spirit or God and your AC's on, how do you know that that's divine? Or if it's just the AC on? You know what I mean? Or if it's just a fan on, or maybe you have the window open and there's a breeze blowing. True enough, now again, this is where it gets tricky. True enough, you could totally say that, well, that was the goddess who made the wind blow at that exact same moment that I said this. And in some situations, that is the case. But in other situations, you start to stumble and you start to kind of trip, and then it could lead in a very negative aspect in multiple ways, that you're thinking every single thing that you experience is a divine sign. Now, specifically mundane before magical, say you were doing a working and you've been using this candle brand for years. It's always burned perfectly depending on the spell work, right? And if you're asking yourself when you're watching this, why are you always talking about wax and candles? Because some people believe that depending on the working, and depending on how the candle reacts, is depending on resulting of said working. So say you have a taper candle that has burned completely down, there's no leftover wax, there's no buildup on the sides, the flame was extremely strong, sometimes it popped and flickered, but other than that, you had no issues, right? That means that there's no blockages. In other words, there's nothing that's preventing that energy from going through. So it's going clearly through, no issues. Say you're doing one. And actually a prime example is I did a cord cutting the other day, and I used 3 candles. The center candle and then 2 other candles tied right next to it. Never really experienced this before, but I lit all 3 of the candles, and once it got to where the cord was like fastened around it and it started to rapidly melt, 2 streams of a stream formed from this candle, and then one formed from the one in the middle, and literally they went this way, that way, and this way around and connected. All 3 of them connected almost instantly. Where I burn my candles at, there are no AC, there's nothing that would dictate those candles from doing that. I make sure of this when it comes to the airflow and where I'm burning it at. Obviously, you need to have some type of airflow, that way you don't suffocate, but you get what I'm saying. So I took that as an interpretation that there was still a lot there, so that cord cutting was not officially, it did not go through correctly because there was so much behind it. Now, not everybody reads the wax, and there are multiple workings where I will not read the wax whatsoever. But that goes into candle making, and that gets more complex because with candle making is science. Even if you go to the store and get a 7-day candle and melt that down, anything you add to it and the temperature that that wax is at when that item or oil or herb is added to it, it will affect how the wax and candle in itself fully burns. It'll affect how much oxygen is going to the wick. There have been times where I've attempted to do this and I added too much to it and it would not burn properly to where it just suffocated the candle out. Mundane before magical. If you know you've made a clinical error, or you know an error has been made or something like that, because you understand the basics of how to make candles and things like that, then you can go ahead and take that out, okay? Now say you had a weird candle, do that, and then you set it back up step by step at the exact same way you did the other one, and it burned the same way. Not mundane. 9 times out of 10, that'll probably be magical. You see what I'm saying? There's a way to test if what you're experiencing is. Now, a lot of the times this also gets a little bit complex because a lot of the times when divinity, gods and goddesses or spirits interact with us, a lot of the times it's how we perceive that energy. In other words, stating that if a goddess reaches out to you and there are 10 people in that same room, it doesn't mean that they're going to experience or even feel that. You will. See what I'm saying? And everybody's going to be different of how they go about mundane before magical. If you start having bad luck, right, in your life, do not automatically go to thinking somebody has hexed you. For one, you're giving some random power that may or may not exist. Person, you're giving them power, believing that they have enough power to interfere with your life, okay? Not to mention, say if you do know this person, but you automatically assume, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, aka what I like to call sometimes as self-hexing. And yes, that is a thing. You can self-hex yourself, whether that is mistakenly adding something to a spell that shouldn't be done, whether the thought process wasn't there. So many other things can affect that to where you self-hex yourself. But specifically, it could also be your anxiety. It could be you're just having a bad day. Unfortunately, we don't always have good days, but you also have to realize that everybody has those moments where you accidentally forget your keys or you accidentally misplace this or something like that. Don't automatically go to thinking you've been hexed, because then you're going to spiral. And most importantly, and I've used this example before, say you're randomly in the park and I walk up to you, pick up a rock, or I have a rock in my hand or stick, and I hand it to you, whisper something over it, and look at you and say, congratulations, you've been hexed. After that, because the hex seed had been planted, take in mind, I actually didn't do anything except for just handed you a stick. But I planted an idea in your head, right? So depending on how your brain works, right after that, you experience something that we all experience. Your shoelace snaps and you trip. Or you lock your keys in your car accidentally. Because in reality, you were too distracted, but because you were on the phone, you also balancing your groceries, but your mind may automatically go to, oh fuck, that random stranger in the park who said I'm hexed. After that one moment of connecting something that is not connected to that moment, it winds up, So after that, every other experience that you consider bad luck, you're going to add up to that, oh god, that random person who hexed me, thus feeding into something that you yourself created. Remember, our minds are very strong. Take in mind, if you have anxiety, what I mean by that, Mark, is not the fact that every thought you have is going to manifest around you. That's not how that works. But it's also to be cautious of how you say. But yeah, once that seed's planted, you're going to have to dig it out. So if you go through the mundane route and then go to magical, it helps. Another thing that helps with this, especially if you're wanting an actual sign, a physical sign, bioregalism. I hope I said that right. It is the study and the observance of not just wildlife, but a lot of the times wildlife. Basically, the study of your specific environment, from how trees, how the plants, what animals are completely normal to your area and what are not. Another example of this, and I've said this 1,000 times before, but it's a perfect example. If I have a tree in my front yard where redbirds nest, and then I ask my deities to give me a sign, and then all of a sudden I walk outside and see a redbird or a robin, that now I'm going to have to decipher, okay, was that just because they nest in that tree so they're always on my property, or if that was them answering me, versus me walking out and seeing a bald eagle in my front yard. You see what I'm saying? I live around a lake, so I do have bald eagles, but they've never been on our property. It's always been like a neighbor's or something like that. But you see what I mean? So if you study your specific area and how the animals react to that for an entire year through all the seasons, you're going to be able to learn what is normal and what is not normal. These are all things to make sure we keep a foot in reality, okay? That's what witches do. We constantly have one foot in the paranormal and spiritual world, and then we have one foot grounding us and anchoring us into reality. Because the last thing we need to do is mix losing touch with reality with witchcraft, because it gets a little dicey. So, I hope I gave a good enough example to describe what we mean by mundane and magical and why it is important to incorporate that into your practice. I'm going to keep this fun and short. So if you've made it to the end of this, what is your favorite necklace or piece of jewelry that you have, or piece of clothing that you have? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if you do mundane before magical or not. But yeah, until then, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you get all the notifications when I go live and or when I post.